What do you remember about cell biology from grade 10? When you look at cell biology. What types of cells did you learn about last year?
Plants and animal cells.
Plant cells and animal cells. Anything else? Did you learn any other types of cells last year? No. Stem cells? Yes, we learned about stem cells. Adult stem cells and embryological stem cells. Yes. But stem cells basically are undifferentiated cells that we know of. Okay? Right? So that's good. That's a good point. So when we start looking at things and we look at diversity, diversity means difference. Okay, and biodiversity means there's a lot of differences. And back in the 1600s, it was easy to classify things as plants or animals. If you even go further beyond that, it was just living things. And then they started looking at smaller things. And what makes a plant a plant? If you were to define to someone and explain to someone who's never seen a plant before, what is a plant? What would you say? It has xylem and phloem in some parts of the plant, yes? What else? Let's brainstorm. What do you call a mushroom? So when we start looking at, in grade 10, we talk about plants and animals. You can't just stop at plants and animals because mushrooms are neither plants nor animals. And in fact, mushrooms are closer to animals than they are plants, which is kind of strange. Because when you look at it, when we start dividing life up, we can look at life as heterotrophs or autotrophs. And this gets back to the concept of trophic levels from grade 9. Do you remember trophic levels? Those are the feeding levels like herbivore and carnivore and all of that stuff. Those are the trophic levels. Troph means to feed or food. Okay? And so heterotroph means they need to obtain food or energy from somewhere else. Okay? Autotrophs, auto means self, troph, feeding. Okay? They basically produce their own energy. So autotrophs, an example of an autotroph would be a plant. Because a plant creates its own energy through photosynthesis. Heterotroph, an example, would be an animal or a fungus. Is not only are there only heterotrophs and autotrophs, then we started getting into some small little things called bacteria. And bacteria didn't fit any of the autotroph or heterotroph because some bacteria are autotrophic and some are heterotrophic and some are chemoautotrophs and some are chemosynthetic and photosynthetic. And bacteria, what they noticed when they looked at the cells, have no nucleus. They have no membrane-bound organelles. When we look at this, you have to look at types of cells as those with a nucleus or membrane-bound organelles, or those without. And those ones, the types of cells that do not have, are prokaryotic. They don't have organelles. And those that do have organelles are eukaryotic. And if you had me for grade 10, we talked about these. When you look at this, pro means before, karyo means nucleus. Okay? So prokaryotic means before nucleus. Eu, on the other hand, EU means good. And what does karyon mean? Nucleus. So prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotes do have a membrane-bound organelles and a nucleus. They both have DNA, though. All of them have DNA. They are all cellular, which means they all are contained within cell membranes. But they start dividing out into prokaryote and eukaryote. They all have cytoplasm. Okay, plasm means water. Cyto means cell. They're all full of cell water. So Linnaeus didn't know the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic. But Linnaeus' job was to figure out how to classify things. And Linnaeus came up with this lovely little thing called binomial nomenclature. Okay? Big word meaning, bi meaning to, nom, name, system. Okay? So he came up with this two-naming system, and he based it on Latin roots. Okay? Biologists love to use Latin because it's a dead language. It's kind of ironic. But Latin doesn't change. Okay? So if you're studying Latin, no one still speaks it, so it's not evolving. So when you change something in Latin, you don't. Because no one speaks it, it's not changing. English language changes. And by basing it on Latin, everybody on the planet could converse in the same language. Okay? And what he did was he came into a big system and he said, okay, we're going to start with the biggest group and we're going to call them kingdoms. Okay? So we're going to devise kingdoms, and then we're going to divide it again into phyla, or phylums, then classes, then orders, then families, then genus, and then finally species. Okay? So he came up with this lovely mnemonic. No, he didn't come up with the mnemonic, but he came in and he said, okay, if we're going to classify life as here's life, everything in life, we're going to divide it into various kingdoms. Okay? And since then, we've changed the kingdoms from what he originally had. And then, once you have the kingdoms, within the kingdoms, then we're going to branch out into the phylums. And then from the phylums, we have classes. And then from the classes, you split them into orders. And from the orders, we split them into families, then the genus, then the species. And the way I remember this is that it's a way that is King Phil comes over for good supper. Okay, King Phil comes over for good supper. KPHCOFGS. Okay, so if you're trying to remember what comes first, kingdom, phylum, class, order, that sort of thing. Where do we fit into this? Well, if you look at this, we are kingdom Animalia. Okay, we're in the animal kingdom. Just like all the other animals, we fit together. We are in phylum Chordata. which means we have a spinal cord. So anyone who has a spinal cord, or any animal that has a spinal cord, we're in phylum Chordata. We are in class Mammalia. So all the mammals are under the same class. And what makes a mammal a mammal?
Milk.
Sorry?
Milk.
Milk. Producing milk. Okay? They feed their infants milk. All mammals feed milk. Sorry, question? So, class Mammalia, we're order Primata, we're primates. We're family Hominidae, we're hominids, we basically walk on 2 feet. And we're genus Homo, species Sapiens. So from now on, when I'm marking something and you refer to something in its scientific name, the scientific name always has the genus. I always spell it with the genus and the species name. When you write the scientific name for this, when you write it, genus always has it capitalized. The first one is uppercase, the first letter. The species is always all lowercase. I am expecting this to be done correctly from now on. Genus, capitalize the first letter. Species is always lowercase. And it's underlined or italics. From now on, it's underlined or italics. So when you look, here's an example. If I were to do an example of Canis lupus. Okay? Canis lupus. Canis is the genus. Lupus is the species. Does anyone know Canis lupus? A tube worm. No, tube worms that live off the coast of Vancouver. And they're the largest tube worms in the world. And Eudystylia vancouveri is the name, the scientific name for them. Eudystylia is like a tube worm, and it's named after words basically found, vancouveri. They make it into that Latinized by putting the I's at the end. Okay? But Vancouver is a place, and normally in Vancouver you would always capitalize it, correct? But you don't capitalize it here because the species name is vancouveri. Okay? Do you know Gary Larson? You ever read the Far Side comics? You guys never? You're too young. Okay. Anyway, the Far Side comics, he used to do them about bacteria and things like that. Well, scientists discovered a new bacterium, and they named it after Larson. So he has a bacteria named after him. And so it's not capital Larson, it's a little L for Larson. So that's, when you look at it, you write it in underline or italics. Okay, you don't need to do both. Do one or the other, please, if you're typing it out. If you use the species a second time, let's say you're writing about Eudystylia vancouveri. So the first time you write it, you have to write out Eudystylia and then vancouveri is second. The second time you write it, all you have to write is E period vancouveri. Because if you write E vancouveri, earlier in the paper I will have seen Eudystylia vancouveri. I think I spelled Eudystylia wrong, by the way. If you see E. coli written it's understood that E. coli is a bacteria. But the E actually stands for the genus. But it doesn't stand for Eudystylia. Earlier in a paper, you will have found E. coli as Escherichia coli. Yes, Escherichia. It's a really cool name. It's really weirdly spelled. But it's so common and we study it so often, most people don't even write in the paper Escherichia before it. They just write E. coli. But to do it properly, when you write a paper, you talk about E. coli for the first time, you should include the genus name of Escherichia. Okay? And E. coli has subspecies, and there's even subspecies, and they number them. Like E. coli 0159. Okay? E. coli 0159 is a specific type of E. coli found within the guts, the gut lining, the flora of beef cattle that are fed grains. If you have beef cattle that are only fed grass and not grains, they don't have that gut flora. And in fact, 0159 is deadly to us. When you do categories, you categorize something, the way you start it is, we have these things called dichotomous keys. Okay? Di meaning two. It's basically branching in two. They're two branch keys. Okay? So in a dichotomous key, you start with all, and then you branch into two groups. Is it this or is it that? And then you branch again into two more until you keep dividing them down to individuals. That's a dichotomous key. Keep branching until you get down to individuals. And all biologists, if you are a biologist, should be able to use one. Why? Because it helps identify species. Okay?